Die Hansestadt Lübeck, Königin der Hanse. It's the city of 7 towers, a place where humans have lived, traded, worshipped, and fought for 12,000 years. It's a city of ancient cobblestone streets and palatial Gothic churches, telling their stories alongside modern architecture springing from the rubble of the Second World War. Here, amidst the relics of 1,000 departed cultures and the colorful tapestry of modern Europe, Lubeck serves as a place of inspiration, of artistic development, even of pilgrimage. In 1705, Johann Sebastian Bach walked hundreds of miles to study with Dieterich Buxtehude, the famous organist at the Marienkirche. What he experienced during his time in Lübeck changed him forever. The Hanseatic city of Lübeck is located in the far northern state of Schleswig-Holstein, about 45 miles northeast of Hamburg. Home to nearly 250,000 people, it's one of Germany's major port cities. But thanks to the Gothic brick of the Innenstadt, it's listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. One of Germany's largest cities by land area, it stretches all the way to the Baltic Sea, and it's embraced by rivers and waterways, the Trave and the Wakenitz. The city is full of art and inspiration. Walk half a mile in any direction, and you'll find enough to reflect on for hours.
Hello everyone, greetings from the St. Mary's Church in Lübeck. I am Inga Meissner and I send you warm greetings to you all in Massachusetts. We are in my church because I am pastor at St. Mary's in Lübeck for the last 7 months. And we're standing right now in my favorite church in the whole world, in front of my favorite chapel, in my favorite spot here in the church, the St. Mary's Chapel.
Und das ist die Marientiedenkapelle.
Here we can see the 3 plaques with the names of the 99 pastors this church has had over the centuries. I'm the 99th person to hold this position and the 3rd woman. That's a good sign, isn't it?
Ist das nicht ein gutes Zeichen?
The church itself isn't just crazy tall for a church made out of brick. It is also one of the largest in the Church of Northern Germany. That includes Schleswig-Holstein, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, and Hamburg. In my opinion, to my friends in Hamburg, who prefer St. Michael's, you may think it's the 2nd loveliest, but I say it's number 1.
It's hard to understand just how massive the Marienkirche is until you see it in person. At 125 meters, it towers 40 stories into the sky. That's close to the height of the skyscrapers in Boston's financial district. Not bad for a building constructed 700 years ago. I'm about halfway up the stairs now, and I'm getting tired. They keep going. I don't know how much further. Maybe I'm not even half. Oh. Okay, so I'm a little bit tired, but I finally made it up to this section of the stairs. You could keep going and going. It goes so far up, but I'm high enough now to get out to the organ, so I'm about to head out there. I can't wait to experience it and play it tonight and hear it echo in this amazing room. I'm a little tired, though. It's incredible. It's so humbling to be in this space. I'm not afraid of heights, but it's so high up here that if you look over the edge, you get butterflies in your stomach. But it's just such a feeling to be in this room. Amazing.
We're standing here now at the Chapel of Remembrance, and we can see the old bells that hung in the towers until the Second World War.
Und da muss man ein bisschen ausholen, denn es beginnt bereits mit
And the story starts in November of 1940 with the bombing of Coventry. That's when Germany bombed the English heavily and the cathedral was completely destroyed.
sehr stark im Bombenkrieg an. Und die Kathedrale in Coventry wurde zerstört. Damals hat der
It was at that time that the Bishop of Coventry fashioned a cross out of two metal spikes from the beams, thereby beginning the community of the Cross of Nails.
Nagelkreuzgemeinschaft damit initiiert. St. Marien ist seit 1971 Mitglied dieser Nagelkreuzgemeinschaft.
St. Mary's became a member of this community in 1971. They're all connected by the prayer of peace every Friday at noon. Worldwide, there are over 250 churches in this community.
The English firebombing of Lubeck was intended as retaliation for the destruction of Coventry. Britain destroyed the crown of the Hanseatic, the great towers of the city. It was symbolic, but new symbols sprang from the ashes, symbols of peace, reconciliation, and the defiant courage to rebuild.
wir machen hier jetzt gerade was, das darf man nur machen, wenn
Right
man
now, we're doing
Pastorin ist.
something
Wir
that
haben
you're
uns
only
in
allowed to do when you are the pastor.
und das
We're lying on the
ist
floor
einfach
of the high
ein
chancel.
wahnsinniges Gefühl, ein ganz besonderes
It's just
Gefühl.
an
Und
incredible
Wesley zeigt euch
and
jetzt
awesome
warum.
feeling.
Denn Wesley zeigt euch
Wesley's
jetzt,
going to
was
show
wir
you
gerade
why.
sehen.
That's the view we have right now.
Und dieser Blick ist der Grund dafür,
This
oder was
view
am besten
here is a
ausdrückt, warum
perfect
ich vor 20
encapsulation
Jahren
of why I fell in love with this place 20 years ago.
Pastorin seit
Being the
dreiviertel
pastor
Jahr.
here has allowed me to fulfill a
Damit habe
dream
ich
I've
mir
had
einen
for
Traum
20
erfüllen
years.
können, den ich seit 20 Jahren habe. Und der hat mit diesem Raum zu tun. Und
This
mit
dream
diesem
is
Welt und
connected
dem,
to
was
this
wir hier
room,
gerade sehen.
this vault, what we're seeing right now.
Denn es ist eine
It's a
Kirche,
room where I
in
can
der
sense
ich
the presence
die
of
Gegenwart
God
Gottes
like nowhere else.
spüre wie kaum an einem anderen Ort. Denn der Gott, der mir hier begegnet,
Because the God that meets me in
dieses
this
hohe, helle,
bright and
überhelle,
soaring space
ist ein
is
großer
a
Gott,
mighty God,
unheimlich weitherzig
wondrously open-hearted
und es ist ein
and
freundlicher
friendly.
Gott. Denn
One who
ja,
sees
also
me,
einer, der mich sieht,
although I'm so
obwohl
tiny
ich
in
im
comparison
Vergleich
to
zu
him.
ihm so klein bin. Und gerade weil er ein Gott ist, der das
He's a
Kleine
God
sieht
that
und
loves
das
the
Kleine
small
liebt
things.
und schafft
He created
einer
them.
unheimlichen Detailtreue ja, ansieht. Und das ist, das verrate ich jetzt noch.
I'm gonna let you in on a little
allerersten
secret.
Gottesdienst hier hatte,
When I had my very
Motorradgottesdienst,
first church
da war ich
service
noch
here,
nicht hier
that was a
Pastorin.
motorcycle service,
Da war ich
I was the first
wirklich
person
in die
to
Kirche,
arrive in
bevor
the church.
irgendjemand anders in die Kirche durfte.
And
Da habe ich genau
secretly,
das hier gemacht.
I did exactly what we're
Ich wusste
doing
noch
right
gar
now.
nicht, ob ich das darf,
I had no idea if I was allowed to do it,
aber ich durfte.
but I was allowed.
What a story. I have to say, when I was 11 years old, I heard the story about how Bach walked all the way up here to study with Buxtehude. And for the last 20 years, I've thought about it. And today I played church in this amazing room. I've never experienced anything like it. I had the opportunity to come across the ocean, to come to another continent, to learn so much, and then to sit in that balcony.
And he played Buxtehude.
I did. What else?
The organs that Tunder, Buxtehude, and Bach played collapsed into the rubble of the towers and the roof. Centuries of craftwork, memorials, and historic artifacts were destroyed in seconds. But many pieces survived. The baptismal font from 1337, the winged altarpiece, the burial slabs. Some things were restored, others rebuilt, and there are even a few new additions to the splendor of the interior. There are people alive today who remember the church being painstakingly rebuilt by citizens of the Hansestadt. And because of that, it represents so much more than just a church. It's a symbol of reckoning with the past and building the future, one brick at a time.
I'm Fabian Luchterhand. I've been studying here in Lübeck for almost 7 years. I began in 2013 studying church music. As a matter of fact, that's why I came to northern Germany. I'm actually from southern Germany, from Heidelberg, also an incredibly beautiful old city. That's why I felt very comfortable in Lubeck. Between my bachelor and master's, I spent half a year in Toulouse, where I studied with Michel Bouvard. And then I came back here for the master's in church music, which I'm almost done with. And what's really lucky is that I have a position here at this incredibly beautiful church.
Wunderschöne Kirche. Nicht so schlecht, ne?
Yeah, I'm really lucky to be able to practice there, and first and foremost, to shape the music here, to host concerts, and sort of be able to put my own mark on the musical life of this city.
so im Musikleben dieser Stadt ein bisschen meinen Beitrag zu leisten.
Ja.
Quite simply, it's a beautiful building, but also very significant. It was the first large all-brick church in the Eastern Sea.
Also älter als die andere.
Yeah, a little bit older. In Lubeck, everything's old.
Ja, alles ist alt in Lübeck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the cathedral was really the first one to be finished. I believe it was finished in 1247, so built through the 11 and 1200s.
und 13. Jahrhundert gebaut. Und
At the beginning, it wasn't as long as it is now, roughly maybe half as long. Then, a little bit later, the Marian church was finished. It was longer and taller. That's why they elongated it, so they could at least be the longest church. It was always kind of a battle between the cathedral. The cathedral was the bishop's church, so you could say the church of the nobles. And on the other side, St. Mary's, it was the church of the merchants. So in Lubeck, it was always a huge battle. Who is more powerful? People wanted to demonstrate power, so they did that with their buildings.
Ja, manche Sachen verändert sich niemals.
Exactly.
Genauso heutzutage.
And today, people build the tallest buildings in the world in Dubai. But back then, Lubeck was the Dubai, more or less.
Also kannst du uns dann, natürlich bin ich Orgelnerd und
Ich auch.
Me too.
und du auch, also aber ein paar Leute bei meiner Kirche würde gerne ein bisschen von dieser Orgel hören. Kannst du uns ein bisschen davon erzählen?
Ja, also es gibt
Yeah.
im Dom
So here in the
eine lange
cathedral,
Tradition
there's a
von
really long
verschiedenen
tradition of
Orgeln,
various organs.
die
Probably the most
wahrscheinlich
famous
berühmteste
organ
Orgel
of the
des Doms
cathedral
gibt es
is,
leider nicht mehr.
unfortunately, doesn't exist anymore.
Aber zur Zeit von
But
Dieterich
at least during the time of
Buxtehude,
Dieterich
den
Buxtehude, I'm
wahrscheinlich
sure
die meisten
most organ nerds
Orgelnerds
know
kennen,
him,
Oh ja.
because
denn er
he
ist
was
wahrscheinlich
one of
Lübecks
Lubeck's most
berühmtester
famous
Musiker.
musicians.
Gab es
There
im
was an
Dom
organ
eine
in the
Orgel
church
von
from
Abschnittke, aber es gibt sogar
and there's even a
die-
rumor
das,
that Buxtehude
Gerücht
was
so ein
a
bisschen,
little
dass
bit jealous of
Buxtehude
this
selbst auf
organ
diese Orgel
and
neidisch
wanted
war
to
und
have an
gerne
organ like that
so
in
eine Orgel
his
in seiner
church, St.
Marienkirche,
Mary's.
Buxtehude war in St. Marien,
He was
haben
a little
wollte.
dissatisfied with his own organ.
Und mit seiner
So,
eigenen Orgel
it's possible
unzufrieden.
actually that the
Also
Schnittke organ
möglicherweise
is,
war sogar die Schnittke
from the
Orgel
cathedral
im
here,
Dom
was the
die
best
beste
Buxtehude organ.
Orgel. Es gab sehr, sehr, sehr strenge Vorschriften der
There were
Architekten
extremely
damals,
particular
die wirklich
strictures
tolle
from the
Arbeit
architect
geleistet
at
haben,
that
muss ich sagen,
time.
denn deswegen ist der
And
Dom
the
so
architect
schön, wie er
did a
jetzt
really
ist.
great job. That's why the
Licht
church is so
durchflutet,
beautiful.
große
Light
Fenster.
floods through
Und
huge
das Konzept
windows.
war, dass es nicht
The concept
viel
was that there shouldn't be
Dinge
anything
gibt
in the
im
church
Raum,
like
die-
the
also
old
zum Beispiel
pews
kein
and so
altes
forth.
Gestühl mehr
Just a
oder so.
few old
Nur ein
relics
paar
that survived the
alte,
bombing.
Sachen,
like,
die den
for
Krieg
example,
überlebt
the
haben, zum
Triumph
Beispiel das
Cross.
Triumphkreuz,
Genau.
sind noch dort. Aber deswegen, das Konzept war sozusagen
The concept
einen
was as
möglichst
far as
neutralen,
possible to make a
leeren
neutral
Raum,
and
in dem diese
spare
Dinge sehr gut
room
zur Geltung
where the
kommen, zu
relics can be
konstruieren.
appreciated.
Und die Orgel sollte
And the
deswegen
organ
auch nicht
shouldn't
so viel
take up
Platz
too
und
much
nicht so viel
space
Licht
or
wegnehmen.
too much light.
Darum steht sie an der Seite.
That's why it's on the side.
Und dann hat aber die dänische
But the Danish organ
Orgelbauer
builder
Markussen
Markussen achieved
unglaublich tolle
incredible
Arbeit
things with
dabei,
this instrument.
diese Orgel mit
Despite the
diesem
small
wenigen Platz
space,
dann doch
the
so
organ is
groß
so
und schön zu
grand and full of
konstruieren, wie sie
beauty.
ist. Also
It's a
es
really
ist
incredible
gemessen daran
instrument.
ein ganz besonderes Instrument.
Dürfen wir es dann ein bisschen sehen?
Na klar.
Absolutely.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Gerne.
Gut.
We are very fortunate that we have a second organ here in the cathedral besides the Marquesan. Namely this little original Italian Baroque organ from 1777 from the Italian organ builder Biagio the Great. It belongs to the School of Music, but stays here in the cathedral in this breathtaking baptistry. We use it mostly for small concerts or to accompany the baptisms, and also for chamber music. It's in mean tone temperament, which is beautiful for all Baroque music. You can play Frescobaldi, but also Samuel Scheidt. Even the North German Baroque sounds wonderful. So really just a beautiful additional instrument for the cathedral.
Und schon wieder etwas Schönes.
Visiting Lubeck is a little like time travel, but not the kind of time travel where you go to a specific year. It's more like the whole area is pulsing with all of the years at the same time. The area around the city is mostly farmland, and it's relatively flat. It's just far enough from Hamburg to feel isolated, or maybe better put, insulated. There are old things in a new style, and new things in an old style. These sorts of juxtapositions aren't unique to Lubeck, but the way they interact with one another, this nexus of ancient history, extreme wealth, war, reconstruction, cultural diversity, that's what leaves the indelible mark. It's sort of like making music on a computer and pressing it into a record, or performing a brand new play on an ancient, creaky stage. The mediums meld together, and the result is dynamic.
Ja, herzlich willkommen hier in St. Jakobi in Lübeck.
Well, welcome to St. Jakobi here in Lubeck, a church of the seafarer, and first and foremost, the historic organ. My name is Gregor Fru. I've been the assistant organist here at Jakobi since fall of 2019. I was born in 1999 at Deggendorf in Bavaria in southern Germany. I'm now 20 years old. There I visited various schools. At 6 years old, I started to play the piano. By age 10, the organ, which ended up being my primary instrument. I've studied church music and organ alongside one another since 2018 at the School of Music here in Lubeck, and so I'm now in my 4th semester. St. Jakobi is one of the primary churches of the central city, and therefore a center for magnificent music. And the music is supported by 3 pillars. Ulrike Gast, she's the cantor of this church. Professor Arvid Gast, he's the titular organist, responsible for the historic instruments. And my responsibilities cover everything from playing the organ in lots of different church services, playing organ vespers, playing concerts in the Lubeck Organ Summer, an international concert series each year here in the church, and then continuo playing, rehearsal and choral accompaniment, and the other odds and ends of the church services.
Oratorien, Choraufführungen und großer Kirchenmusik in Gottesdiensten.
We find ourselves here at my smallest place of work at Jakobi, the so-called Richborn-Positiv. This lovely little choir organ, named after its original builder Joachim Richborn, is an absolutely wonderful instrument. Built in 1673, it was the choral organ, the third historic instrument in this church. Unfortunately, the wind chest and pipes were not preserved, but it was lovingly restored in 2003 by Mads Kiersgaard, and then placed here. So we see a historic case, new materials in an old style. And this instrument is a wonderful gift where we can play particularly the music of the early Baroque, Sveling, Tunder, etc., and bring this music to life in the fullness of the room.
Tunder und so weiter aufzuführen und hier in diesem tollen Raum zum Klingen zu bringen.
For me, it's a great joy to be allowed to fulfill the role of assistant organist, because I have to tell you, as an organ student, as a musician, you need several elements to be fulfilled in your work. You need good instruments, inspiring rooms, a gifted instructor, and a discerning audience. And all four of these elements can be found here at Jakobi in abundance, so you can understand why I love it so much.
Gewährleistet und ich kann mich also glücklich schätzen, hier arbeiten und wirken zu dürfen. Im Sommer 2018 nahm ich am Bundeswettbewerb Jugend musiziert teil.
In summer of 2018, I participated in a competition here for young musicians across all instruments, and I was very fortunate that summer to be awarded a first prize.
Spielen zu dürfen in diesem Wettbewerb.
While I was here in the competition, I really got to know the city well, and also my future teacher, Professor Arvid Gast. So the decision to come study in Lubeck in the fall was an easy one. The city persuaded me, the diversity of everything, the great spectrum of unique instruments and historical rooms. It was all absolutely fascinating to me from then on.
Die Jakobikirche ist bekannt, weil es hier Instrumente gibt.
The Jakobi Church is famous around the world, I think, because the instruments here are just so engaging for organists. That's the first reason. And the second is that Hugo Distler was here, active from 1931 to 1937. And he was responsible for revolutionizing 20th century short-form composition. It's not only because he was such an impactful composer, but also that he was such a fantastic choral director himself, and he knew how to use the voices to full effect. So really, it's the instruments of the Jakobi Church, the Stellwagen organ on the north side, and the heritage of Hugo Distler.
Die Geschichte der großen Orgel ist sehr kompliziert, weil die große Orgel in der Regel in den
The story of the
Stadtkirchen
great
immer
organ is
die
very
größten
complicated
Veränderungen
because the
sich
great
hat,
organ continuously
ja,
underwent stylistic
erdulden
changes.
müssen. Das Hauptwerk ist gotischen Ursprungs,
The Hauptwerk is of
1503
Gothic
und
origin,
im Material.
1503
Dann
with
geht es
extant pipework.
1573 weiter mit
Then
dem
it continued
Rückpositiv,
further to
dann die Aaltürme,
1573 with the
dann
Rook
steht das
Positiv,
Gehäuse quasi.
then the pedal
Aber es
towers.
ist eben danach
So there was
immer
more or less the
wieder
case.
daran gearbeitet
But thereafter
worden.
it continued to be modified and altered and developed.
Dann nach dem
In the
Krieg
18th century,
nicht
the
wieder
organ
gut
was
aufgebaut,
romanticized.
relativ
Then,
spät
after the war, not properly
abgebaut,
reworked, and
1941
relatively
aufgebaut,
late.
erst wieder in den 60er
It
Jahren, also
really
sie hat
lay
noch so
there
lange
until the
gelegen.
60s.
Und bei dieser
So during this time, the
Gelegenheit ist
historical
leider auch
wind chest
die
from
historische
Richborn was
Hauptwerksanlage
lost.
von Richborn
Everything was
verloren gegangen.
rebuilt, which only held until
Was
1984.
dann nur gehalten hat
Then in
bis
84,
1984.
it's reworked by
Seit
Schuka.
1984 ist diese
In
Orgel
2013,
Schuka-Orgel,
further improved upon by the
2013 nochmal
Flentrop
verändert
organ
wurde durch
builders from the
Flentrop
Netherlands.
Orgelbau aus den
And the
Niederlanden.
organ is, at this
Jetzt
point,
denke ich
a
an
really
eine
fine
wunderbare
concert organ with
Konzertorgel
so
mit
many
vielen
possibilities,
Möglichkeiten
and still, to
und
this day,
vielen historischen
many
Registern. Es
historical
sind immerhin
registers.
22
22
alte
historical
Register, die in
stops
dieser Orgel
that
noch
still
existieren.
exist
Und
inside
man
this
kann bei
organ.
jedem
I
Stück,
love telling all the
das erkläre ich immer
students
gerne den
this.
Studenten,
With
aber
every
auch den
piece,
Leuten, die
there is
das
a
dann selber hören.
corresponding
Bei
step
jedem Stück
between
in
our predecessors from
Korrespondenz
way, way
mit
back,
unseren
hundreds of years ago.
Urahnen, die
There's
hier
always
vor
corresponding
Hunderten von
sound.
Jahren schon Musik gehört haben.
The
Und
Hauptwerk
da ist der
principle from
Hauptwerkprinzipal von
1503 and the Rook
1503,
Positiv from
Rücksicht von
1573,
1573.
and then the
Und wenn
pedal
das
comes
Pedal
in,
dazu kommt,
well, then there's
dann
100 years
wiederum Jahre
later,
später,
and when you
wenn ich
play
aufs Schwellwerk
on
gehe,
the
dann
swell work, then you have
1984. Also
about
das
1984, so it really doesn't get any better.
Ich zeige euch jetzt den Prinzipal 16 aus dem Hauptwerk. Das ist ein
I'm showing you all now the
Fassadenprinzipal,
16-foot principle
der
from the
doppelt
Hauptwerk.
angelegt ist, 16
That's a
Fuß.
facade principle,
Und der
doubled,
älteste Bestand
and it's the oldest
hier in
stop
der
here in the
Kirche überhaupt
church,
ist.
actually in
In
the
der
entire
ganzen Stadt.
city.
Und wir haben davon noch 5 Register.
There are 5
die
stops
ich
from
gerne
that
noch mal
era,
zusammenziehe.
which I'm going to
Das
put
sind
together
also
for you.
Bestandteil
It's part of
eines
the
goldischen
Gothic
Blockwerks
blockwork.
gewesen. Einfach prächtig. Also
It's simply
so muss man sich
splendid.
ein Blockwerk vorstellen, jetzt noch mit
That
ein
helps
paar
you
mehr
understand
Mixturen,
the ancient blockwerk.
aber doch ein
There
sehr
would have been a
voller,
couple of mixtures in
voluminöser Klang
addition, but
und
still a
Prinzipalanlagen
wonderfully
eben alle
full,
doppelt
voluminous
besetzt.
sound where the principles are doubled.
Wir stehen hier vor der Hugo Distler Plakette, die die Gemeinde anbringen ließ, weil Hugo Distler
We're
hier von
standing here in front of the
1931
Hugo
bis
Distler plaque
1937
that the church
Organist war.
installed.
Distler
Distler was organist here from 1931 to 1937. He had to give up his duties in Leipzig because he was in desperate need of money, so he was happy that the position here in Lubeck was free. He took over the choral duties and he began to work with Bruno Grusnick, who had edited many of the Buxtehude cantatas, and he headed up the so-called Sing- und Spielkreis, which afterwards ended up premiering many of Distler's works. A really considerable collection of choral music sprang up here in Lubeck, alongside the organ music written for the Stellwagen-organ here in Jakobi. In 1935, Distler began the first restoration of the Stellwagen, which opened up new possibilities. After his time here, he went to Stuttgart. There were very, very great problems here in Lubeck. Restrictions on the pastors, the so-called Kirchenkampf, or struggle of the church, was very heavy here. Many pastors were under house arrest. Distler fled this situation and went to teach at the school in Stuttgart. but there he was intensely frustrated by the Nazis. Distler couldn't change everything by himself. Stuttgart wasn't far enough to escape the evils of authoritarianism, fascism, and hatred. He became increasingly depressed, and although he had a lifelong struggle with mental health, it's been argued that his spirit was crushed by the evils of Nazism. He couldn't write sacred music. He was under constant fear of being conscripted, and the bombing raids terrorized him. At the age of 34, he took his own life. While St. Jakobi was never physically destroyed, it's not always the bombs that bring destruction. Like a diamond from intense pressure, Distler's work changed the musical landscape of the 20th century, and it's still glistening.
Als Bach hier 1705 in Lübeck war, ging es ihm darum, von Buxtehude zu lernen.
When Bach was here in 1705 to learn from Buxtehude, I take it as a given that Bach must have traveled all around the city to see what sorts of organs there actually were here. From the time in Lüneburg, he had a sense of the North German organ style, where everything was so much larger and grander than what he knew of from Thüringen. The churches must have made a huge impression on him, because they were so extraordinarily tall and wide, much larger than what he knew from his hometown. There was a small church there at his first position in Arnstadt, where the church had been burned, and a smaller one had to be quickly built. Everything was so small and tight, there was hardly room to breathe, and a very small organ. He'd never experienced an organ even to be painted. They were made out of pine wood. But here in Lubeck, he experienced churches with 2, even more organs. He must have been absolutely blown away by everything. When he was here at the time, the Hanse, the traders' center, it was a bit of an economic downturn. Everything was heading downhill. There was debt from the war. They had bought themselves free. And so it was, and it has continued to be the case, that Lubeck is a conservative city. It thinks conservatively. And the currents of time tend to sort of flow around it. But yes, I think it's absolutely certain that Bach played here, as far as we know. Matheson and Handel were here, we know. But absolutely, Bach must have come to see what was up with Jakobi, and Buxtehude certainly would have told him how much he wanted an Arp-Schnitger organ built in his own Marienkirche, and how in the end the Dome had gotten the instrument. So he would have heard all of these stories. He would really have wanted to hear everything from Buxtehude's perspective.
Also diese neueste CD, die ich gemacht habe an den beiden großen Orgeln hier in der Kirche.
So the newest CD I've recorded on both of the large organs in the church, it handles the question of what kind of music did Bach bring to Buxtehude, and what did he take with him when he left? So this time between Arnstadt, he's a young organist who's eager to learn, to the time afterwards in Mühlhausen, something happened. Something changed. He really did grasp the North German style, but he did something further with it. He made it increasingly monumental. The Buxtehude Preludium lasts 7 to 8 minutes, but for Bach it's lasting 10 to 11 minutes. The fugue themes are longer. The forms are much, much larger, but they really work on these instruments in North Germany. And I think it's fascinating to see how his music is translated to an early Baroque instrument like the Stellwagen, and how it could sound in a room like this, but also what he perhaps heard in his own head while he was composing. It's worth it to come to Lubeck to study, because here you have original instruments, original rooms, and an original city all together.
Er lebt hier in vielen,
You experience in
vielen
so many rooms the atmosphere of the Hanse, and for people who are interested in organs, you cannot escape the North German organ culture and how it was passed on to Bach.
Von daher immer die
Lubeck will
erste.
always be the first choice. There is this fascinating tradition in the city of Lubeck where, for centuries, they would bring young red wines from the Bordeaux region of France, and they would sell them here in the city. And the wine became very famous and very popular. And even the French thought in the 19th century that the Bordeaux here, after they were aged in the cold and damp cellars of Lubeck, were even better than what they could have gotten in the Bordeaux region itself. And ever since I learned this, I thought it was a perfect metaphor for this city and what it represents, for all the people who visit, for all the people who've come here across all the centuries. You come as what you are, and you're still that, but you change and you mature and you develop yourself here. As long as you keep an open mind, as long as you ask questions, and as long as you just open your ears and listen to the instruments, open your eyes and look around this place, you learn so much. So once you're here, you take the city with you. And so, honestly, I can't say that I'm excited to leave. It's amazing here. But I know the city's going to go with me. And I know that the experiences I've had here will inform who I am as an artist, who I am as a musician, for the rest of my life. I have learned music since I've gotten here. I've learned what it's like to play the music that was written in these rooms, in these spaces, to hear the rhetoric of the Stilus Fantasticus bouncing off of the original bricks of the original walls. I have learned how deep my love of marzipan goes. But I've also learned how to listen better and how to think better, how to notice better. And there's so much to see that you have to stop and take note of things. There's so much to hear. You have to pause and listen. And even if I hadn't learned music here, even if I hadn't experienced those things, this city would still have imparted to me a gift that I can't shake. And I consider myself to be incredibly privileged. I am so thankful for the time I have spent in the city of Lubeck. It rains a lot in Lubeck. It's often cloudy. But right now, one of my very last days here in the city, I'm looking at one of the most beautiful sunsets I've ever seen in my whole life. To my left is the towers of the Marienkirche, and over on the other side is the steeple of Jakobi. But in front of me, it's absolutely glorious, and I can't tell what's more beautiful. This moment right now, right here, I will never forget. And it's such a blessing to watch the sunset with you all right here on Lubeck, the queen of the Hanse.